This is Rabbanit Sarna and Rabbi David Wolkenfeld. Shalom and welcome to the Straw Hat. We are the official podcast of Anshe Shalom B'nai Israel Congregation, an Orthodox synagogue in the beautiful, if chilly, Lakeview neighborhood of Chicago, Illinois. This week's episode has 2 parts and an interview. First, we'll have a parsha-themed discussion of tefilat Mincha, the afternoon service, which of course you can participate in any day of the week at Anshe Shalom. We'll follow that up with a discussion of our new Siddur decision. So exciting. It was a very long process. And we're thrilled with the decision that the shul has come to on this front. And lastly, we'll round it out with an interview with Aaron Katchen, who works for Koren and who will be essential in our acquisition of our new Siddurim. So that is also very exciting. We hope you enjoy this episode. So in this week's Chayei, Sara, we have the invention of Mincha. Or at least so the rabbis say.
Yeah, where do the rabbis say that? Because I don't remember Mincha appearing anywhere in parsha-themed Sara.
Well, here's where it appears in parsha-themed Sara. V'yitzei Yitzchak bo mavo be'er l'chayroi, v'hu yoshev be'eretz hanegev. So Yitzchak moves to be'er l'chayroi, that's like where Yishmael went, by the way. That's like the Yishmael spot. Which is always, like, you're always a little fascinated. Like, what was he doing there? Who was he visiting? And anyways, fine.
Great tangent for another time.
And there, v'yitzei Yitzchak lasuach basadeh. Yitzchak went out lasuach, to walk in the field, to meditate. The King James Version translates it as to meditate in the field. Maybe they knew about the Gemara. Lifno arev, v'yisayna v'yar v'hinei gmalim ba'im. And he raises up his eyes and he sees, and the camels were coming. And this is how you know that you need a daven with a mechitza, because otherwise you'll meet your wife.
That is not what the rabbis say. In Masechet Brachot.
Just kidding. Okay, so here's Masechet Brachot.
But the context is important, though. Who is on that camel?
Oh, Rivka.
Right. And she sees him davening Mincha, and
she falls off her camel because men davening are really
something about Yitzchak in his it was very powerful. Okay,
and he was probably not wearing a talis, because then how else would she know
who it was? Right.
Yeah, exactly. That he was the one for her. Anyways, fine. So the Gemara in Brachot has 2 different approaches to kind of where davening comes from. So one is that davening and our specific daily tefillot come from korbanot. And there's a lot of evidence for that, like being the real thing, meaning like Musaf is all about they brought these extra korbanot, and on days when they brought extra korbanot, we say Musaf, and on days when they didn't bring extra korbanot, we don't say Musaf.
So according to that approach, Shachrit is the
morning daily korban tamid, and Mincha is the afternoon korban tamid, and Mariv is the burning of all the extra stuff that's like left on the mizbeach after the whole day, which I always love. Like another tangent for another time, but like I love thinking about Mariv as like burning of the stuff of your day. And anyways, but then the other approach in the Gemara is that the patriarchs actually invented these tefillot. So we didn't wait until we brought sacrifices to have tefillot. No, the patriarchs themselves tiknum, they established them. And the patriarch who establishes Mincha is Yitzchak. So the Gemara says Yitzchak tikein tefilat Mincha. Yitzchak established the Mincha prayer, Shneimar v'yitzei Yitzchak lasuach basadeh lifnot arev. As it says, then Isaac went out to lasuach basadeh, to meditate in the field before the evening. Ve'in sicha ela tefillah. It says the Gemara, there's no such thing as sicha other than it must be tefillah, it must be davening. And how do we know? Because it says in Tehillim, tefillah la'ani ki ya'atof, the prayer of one afflicted, when he, I don't know, there's a lot of different ways of understanding Ya'atov, maybe wraps himself, whatever. V'lifnei Hashem yishpoch sicho. This is the important part. And before Hashem, he pours out his siach, his meditation, his conversation. And so that's how you get siach to be davening, right? Tefillah. And then from there you say, oh, what was Yitzchak doing? Lasuach basadeh. It must be that he was also davening, and we know it was lifnot arev, we know it was in the evening time, and what davening is in the evening time, if not...
Lifnot arev, before the evening
time.
Right,
what davening is before the evening time must be Mincha, thank you. So there we have Yitzchak in our parsha enacting the Mincha prayer.
And it's appropriate to reflect on that at this time of year, because we've just changed our clocks to go back to standard time, and Mincha is kind of a challenge at this time of year. The day that we're recording this, the range of appropriate times to say Mincha is a pretty short range. The earliest Mincha today, I'm just recording this on. Can we reveal that? Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay. It's November 13th, and the earliest Mincha today is 11:59 and 25 seconds, and you can say Mincha until sunset, which is 4:31 and 51 seconds.
So that's both not very much time and also hugely inconvenient time.
Yeah, that is entirely contained within the workday or the school day for many people, and it's a hard obligation to fulfill at this time. In the summer, you can say Mincha at 8:30 in the right, and you can put all your kids to bed, have dinner, take a shower, and then say Mincha, and as the sun sets. In the winter and in the fall, saying Mincha requires actually extricating oneself from one's routine, finding a quiet spot, and for Mincha in the midst of one's other responsibilities.
What's the weirdest place you've ever davened Mincha?
I used to. It's not so this I can't do so much anymore, but you don't have to as much. But I used to. Go into like payphones, where it used to be really convenient. Like if it was like the afternoon, I was walking in the city streets, and you could just duck into a payphone booth and like pick up the phone, and no one would know what you were doing. And
totally, that's super convenient. People now will like put their phones on their ears and daven mincha standing like next to a building, because then if you're just like standing there, no one like looks at you because you're like as if you're doing something. I feel like that's the modern equivalent.
Yes, the modern equivalent.
But definitely, like in college, I was always like this time of year, especially, it was like always between classes. Like I have like 7.5 minutes. Like gotta like find a classroom, and then like people would walk in, and you'd be like.
For those listening, which is everyone, your face is one of frustration and exasperation. Of having the face one would make when you find a quiet room where you think you can daven mincha uninterrupted,
and then a whole classroom of people walks in or something, and you're like in the middle of a Shemona Esrei. I can't even begin to describe how many times that happened when I was an undergrad.
So it's good to plan in advance and to sort of plot out one's day and to think, okay, so here's what I have. Just as you would plan, like when am I going to eat lunch in the course of my day, and when am I get my coffee, and what's my schedule. So let's put 5-10 minutes for mincha. Where can I put that in my schedule?
Yeah, and often it's really hard. Meaning, like if this is the middle of your workday and you work at a cubicle, then like finding somewhere where you can daven mincha is really challenging.
Yeah, it's interesting. In the Talmudic times, people who worked, who were paid like hourly wages, were exempt from saying full mincha because like it was understood that you had a job that you couldn't step away from even for a few minutes. That's really not the employment circumstances I think any of us work under right now, and so it really is appropriate to find time to say mincha, and it's the type of accommodation that workplaces tend to provide.
Especially because it's like. If you're davening alone mincha, like that's 5 minutes. I mean, maybe you're really from and it's 7, but seriously, like, but also the Talmud really imagines it imagines people davening in the middle of their workdays. Like there's people if you were working in a tree and it's like time to daven, like do you have to get down from the tree you're working in? Like really types of labor that are kind of very specific and kind of funny to imagine.
So we should clarify though, you don't have to if you're in a car, you can stay seated in the car and say mincha if you're that's
as long as it's safe.
But if you're driving the car, I'm not sure that you should say mincha. That seems like it's probably you're going to be distracted. But if you're in a taxi or on a bus or on a train, you can say mincha seated. If you're in an airplane, you can say mincha seated, or any tefilat seated. Or you don't. It's standing.
You mean you shouldn't like go stand exactly where the flight attendants need to get to, and like collect a whole bunch of people around you in a minyan?
I don't get extra points. A lot of the like contemporary poskim have really condemned airplane minyanim.
Didn't the RCA put something out about it?
Oh yeah, that was a few years ago. They did. Yeah. Because that prayer with a minyan is really great. Not at the expense, not at somebody else's cheshbon. Not if you're disrupting the flight attendants' distribution of snacks, not if you're interrupting the people who are maybe want to sleep and you're blowing shofar and Chodesh Elul or whatever you're doing,
oh my.
I think that it might be possible if with the cooperation of the flight team that there could be a spot and times where it's not disruptive to the drink distribution, whatever. It's not blocking the bathrooms. It's not waking other people. That really depends on the flight, but mincha should not Because you can say mincha at your seat without a minyan. You shouldn't be, interfering with other people.
Totally. But I do think, and the sources kind of back it up, that there's something actually really special about mincha, that as opposed to shacharit or mariv, which are much less disruptive, meaning, okay, like you might have to wake up earlier than you would otherwise because you need to schedule in time to daven shacharis, or like I've friends who call it like the mariv, where you're like already in bed and then you get back out of bed because you realized you didn't have in mariv yet. But there's kind of like easy kind of benchmarks that you have some control over for shacharit and mariv, whereas mincha, the timing of it, especially this time of year, is really tough. But the Talmud and other places kind of recognizes that you get extra reward for actually carving out the time to say mincha and not forgetting about it. That Elijah the prophet, the Talmud says, was answered in the mincha time, because like that's like the most, it's the time when like God is listening, and because you've like made it to mincha. Rabbi Chalbo says in the name of Rav Huna, L'olam yeheh adam zachir b'tefilat mincha, right? You should always take special care in your mincha prayer, because that's when Eliyahu was answered. That's in Brachot 6b.
Yeah, these are also just worth reminding everyone, there are mincha options, maybe close to like minyan even close to your work. We have on a bulletin board in the shul like a list of like early mincha minyanim throughout the Chicago area. There are several downtown. There might be some near where you work, and I guess for some people we are a close to their work. Yeah, it's interesting to see, like, in terms of our shul's daily minyanim, we have, of course, regulars from the shul, and then we also have, like, a cast of characters who come in seasonally, people who regularly do business in Chicago and come join us whenever they're in town, and we sometimes several times a year, people who come in once every year or so for conferences and come to us for minyanim, and also people who come in the winter, in particular, because they work not that far, and so the winter is the only time when they're able to, like, hop on over to the shul for Mincha Ma'ariv with us.
And we try to incentivize that behavior.
Yes, we one such individual who's now saying Kaddish on behalf of a relative. He endowed the purchase of a whole bunch of Milt's gift cards, which we have been raffling off to those who attend Mincha Ma'ariv during weekdays. So we've been announcing that the days when we do that, it goes out on the weekday Minyan WhatsApp group,
which if you're not on, you should definitely join.
Definitely, lots of great. I mean, you should join if you live in Lakeview and could sometimes come to Minyan.
Right, of course.
I don't think otherwise I don't think it's that interesting. But
you'll find out whether you get a Minyan or not.
Yes. Like I said, not that interesting, but we try to announce in advance to incentivize people who might change their schedule in such a way as to be here for Mincha Ma'ariv on a weekday afternoon. The method I came up with is everyone who wants to participate in the raffle raises his or her hand, and we just sign everyone a number, 1 to however many people there are, and then I have Google give me like a random number generator, and it generates a number, and that's the winner. So it's entirely fair, right? It's
super fair. Yeah, totally. So if you want to like eat a lot of milks, you should definitely come to Mincha Ma'ariv. So in exciting news, our shul finally made a decision about what Siddur we will be purchasing.
I actually think we could just sort of say, in exciting news, our shul finally made a decision. I think anytime a community as large and diverse as ours makes a decision, that's
cause for celebration.
Right. What's it? Ein simcha ela, Hatzarat HaSeikot, right?
Right.
Just
exactly.
Resolving doubt is itself a source of rejoicing, right?
There's a niggin for that, yeah. It's called Hatzarat HaSeikot.
Okay, he'll teach me one day.
We should have sung it at the board meeting.
So for a period of really, I think, years, we've sort of been aware that our stock of Siddurim in circulation has the number in good quality, good condition has declined. We don't quite have enough when our numbers swell for a simcha.
And you love calling pages into books, right? That's your favorite part of Shabbos.
Yeah, I think it limits the amount of pages we can call.
And the poor colorblind people who can't tell the difference between the green book and the black book. What about them?
So many problems in the calling lots of pages. It's just confusing for people who, we're calling pages for people who, are unfamiliar with tefilat, and then they have to like, what book do I have, and what's going on, and like, what am I listening to? So this is all to say that it was understood that there would be a desideratum to have one siddur that would be the main siddur of the shul, that pages could be announced only in that siddur, and just for the sake of facilitating just a smoother, more elegant, more accessible and inviting tefilah experience, especially for newcomers. And I wrote 2 lengthy memos explaining that, one of which was shared with the shul, and one of which was then published online for the... And
we're going to actually use the podcast right now to just read them, right?
No. I thought I'd sort of just like maybe briefly summarize and said, like sort of what the I guess what the process sort of came down to, because they were really, the options that we were considering ended up being somewhat different from what I had thought at the start of the process. I had actually thought that the new RCA Siddur, which is published by the RCA but printed by Koren publishers, would be like a kind of a nice like consensus Siddur for everyone, like maybe nobody's first choice, but maybe like a close second for everybody. But really not that many people liked it, and for various reasons, and so it just sort of seemed like why pick something that like
no one's perfectly excited.
Yeah, like in other words, all the others are like excellent in some ways, and this was sort of mediocre in everything, right? So it's maybe the least offensive, but also like has nothing so like super exciting about it. So that sort of became less of an option, and what then emerged are really two truths, right? So I forget who else who said this. The opposite of a simple truth is a lie, and the opposite of a profound truth is another profound truth. So two profound truths emerge. One is that the current Sachs Siddur, Rabbi Jonathan Sachs's translation and commentary, is just an exemplary English language presentation of tefilah with a commentary that like serves the needs that we want a Siddur commentary to serve in our community, and a translation that serves the needs that we want a translation to serve in a community like ours. That's like profound truth number one. And the other profound truth is that there are a number of individuals, particularly some older individuals, who just had great trouble using the Koren font and layout, and also maybe even more than that, just a great affinity for the classic Art Scroll Siddur from the 80s, like sort of a modern classic of graphic design. It's very, very clear font and printing and the paging, et cetera, et cetera. They really like it. They're used to it, and also another like after whatever, like the story of the kids fighting over there's one lemon, and the brother and sister both want the lemon, and they're fighting who's going to get the lemon, and then it emerges that one wants the lemon to make lemonade and one wants the peel to zest it for baking. And so there's really no conflict at all. So here too, there's really not much of a conflict at all, because I don't really care. Like I have no vested interest in people using. The shul has no interest in what Siddur individuals use, and if there's a Siddur that is going to facilitate your prayer experience, by all means, use it. And
we're so lucky to live in a world where there's a million different Siddurim with all different sizes and shapes and layouts and colors and
nuschot also.
And nuschot, right? And thank God we have a learned community where people know what the options are and have chosen ones that are best for them. And that's honestly that's a blessing. Meaning whoever is davening from the Amud should daven the nusach of the shul. But if whatever you want to do in the privacy of your seat, in terms of tefilah, like. Great, take advantage of what's out there.
That's like a distinguishing feature of Orthodoxy. I have a Reformed Jewish friend who sort of pointed this out, ironically, that the Orthodox synagogue, of all the denominations, it's like most acceptable to be using your own book and saying your own words and standing and sitting, irrespective of what other people are doing, is the Orthodox synagogue, because we're here to daven, like as individuals, we have obligations to fulfill, and we're going to do it in the way that is at the pace that's appropriate for us in the Siddur. So that's great, and we can facilitate that. We can the shul can stock a collection of 10 different varieties, or enough art scrolls for anyone who wants to find one and use one. But we also want to have enough of one other Siddur so that the kind of forward-facing, outward-facing, presentation of the shul exhibits a vision of modern Orthodoxy and religious Zionism that we feel is going to be and accessibility and beauty that we feel is going to be compelling to visitors and people who have no particular preference. Okay, so here's how our shul prays, and so we're going to purchase a larger number of Koren Siddurim. Those will be the main Siddur we use. Those will be the ones which we announce pages, but we're going to make sure we have enough art scroll Siddurim, in good quality, so that somebody who wants one can find one. You'll have to look for them, but it won't be hard to find them.
And if you know where they are, then you won't have to look for them.
Exactly. And the other two pieces of like technological help, we're going to print out and put in these art scroll Siddurim a page.
Someone called it a Rosetta Stone recently.
Rosetta Stone, fine, that's good, right? So when page 207 in the Koren gets announced, that's page 232. And yes, that is an actual corresponding page.
I'm so sorry for you.
So this is very easy to prepare this. I think they already exist, and we will have them.
But you could just do it out of your brain, no?
I could, but I'm not going to have to anymore. That's the point.
Clear up space for other things.
Who knows? Yeah.
Maybe you'll know more people's names or something.
That'd be great. And the other technological solution, the other sort of in the course of this research process, I kind of realized that I had noticed and been upset by the fact that the Art School Siddur has a translation that really is. It's a reference guide, but it's not meant to be used for prayer purposes. Okay, it's printed in italics. It says Hashem instead of any name of God in English or Hebrew. So it's not something you could pray from. It's something that I'm reading this line in Hebrew. I don't quite know what this word means or that word. Let me look at this translation. Now the problem is we have people in our shul who do use the English pages of the Siddurim to pray from, which is very appropriate. Like the halacha is quite clear. You can pray in any language that you understand, Hebrew or any language that you understand.
Yeah.
And it's very appropriate for somebody who's new to tefilat to be saying some or all or occasional prayers in English. And not only so. The Koren translation by Rabbi Sachs, it's a beautiful translation. It's an elegant translation. It's a learned translation. It's also one, so that's all aesthetic and beautiful and like promotes the mission of the shul. But also the article, because the article translation says Hashem's name, I thought, okay, that's going to be merely alienating and off-putting to people who aren't familiar with Orthodoxy. But it also has halachic ramifications because you haven't fulfilled your obligation to say a bracha if you say Hashem, blessed are you Hashem. That's like by definition Hashem is the name.
That's how you do the opposite of fulfilling your obligation.
Exactly.
I don't want to say a bracha right now because it's like not like, let's say I'm not about to drink wine, so I would say bracha ta Hashem b'rei pri hagafen, right?
Because you're discussing what the bracha is. You're teaching somebody. Yeah. You're talking about brachas. You're learning a song, so you say Hashem. It's like.
But that's how you don't do the thing.
Right. So if you're actually trying to, if somebody who so I think we'll have some sort of warning label in the Art School Siddurim saying, for anyone who picks one up,
here's how it should be appropriately used. Exactly.
This translation is really for reference purposes. It's not designed for prayer. If you are praying in English, maybe use a different Siddur, or certainly don't say Hashem, say God or Lord, or say one of God's names in Hebrew, as appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk a little bit about what we're excited for about the Koren Siddur. What does it have going for it?
I'm really excited for its English translation. As I've said, I think our community, we use the English from time to time. Again, newcomers or even oldcomers who just aren't quite so familiar with what does this paragraph mean? What does that word mean? It's a beautiful translation that was edited by somebody who is a great rhetorician. Rabbi Sachs is one of the most effective communicators in the English language about Jewish topics, right? Or any topic, I guess. He's a very effective communicator. He has a beautiful writing style. And we have the advantage of a translation undertaken by somebody who loves two languages. That's really, really special. His commentary, likewise, is responding to the kinds of questions that our modern worshipers, people in Lakeview who come into our shul, the questions we would have about what is the section of tefilat about, what is prayer about, what's the mitzvah of prayer about, what's the prayer experience about. Those are the questions he's responding to, and he draws on a wealth of sources, both Jewish and non-Jewish, as places to turn to kind of help him elucidate and introduce us to the prayers. And the Siddur also, the content of the Siddur, it's designed for a modern Orthodox and religious Zionist community in many ways. I'd say maybe two or three, right? And one, it includes liturgical additions to recognize daughters and how happy we are to have them. Okay, in our community, when a daughter is born, parents almost always have some sort of religious ceremony to celebrate her, not just naming her at Krisit, which is lovely, but also some sort of simchat bat or zevet habat, some religious ceremony to express thanks to God for this gift of a daughter. And the Koren Siddur has such a ceremony that's hundreds of years old, and it's printed in the same books that we use every day, every Shabbat, every holiday. Here is this ceremony that it's not something you found on the internet. It's something that that the Siddur that our community uses each day feels is worth putting between the covers of a book.
And when that girl grows up and becomes bat mitzvah, there's the same the liturgy for Mishaberach for a bat mitzvah. Correct. Is printed on the same page as the Mishaberach for a bar mitzvah.
Correct. Right, which is
about all the liturgy any bar mitzvah has. So
right, again, as is appropriate for our community where we
we celebrate bat mitzvah regularly.
Correct. Yeah. And on the religious Zionist angle, the Siddur has the liturgy for Yom HaAtzmaut, which is a liturgy that our community we say it. We treat Yom Ha'atzmaut, Israel's Independence Day, as a day of religious significance, and we mark it as a day of religious significance. We come together in large numbers and have festive prayers in our shul, right? And hundreds of other shuls just like this one all across the world. And this Siddur puts those prayers again, in between the pages of the covers of our Siddur. It also includes lots of the guidelines for people who travel between Israel and the United States frequently, which is something that, thank God, we have the merit to do. Somewhat some of us more frequently than others, but that's like a regular occurrence in our community. And there are all sorts of liturgical questions that, like for example, in Israel they begin saying "V'ten talim atah livrecha" already on the 7th of Cheshvan, so right after the ancient times, after the pilgrims could return home,
so that it wouldn't rain on them.
Right, they come to Yerushalayim for Sukkot and they go home. And then they can start praying for rain. We wait until December to start saying that.
So I was in Israel on the 7th day of Cheshvan, and so there's a question: what should you do when you're in Israel? Or last year there was someone from Israel who was in our shul on the 7th of Cheshvan, and he piped up and was like, "What's going on here?" Chazar Hashatz. He was like, you said it wrong."
That's funny.
And so, but what that person who's in our shul is supposed to do is ben Eretz Yisrael, someone who their permanent residence is in Israel, who's traveling here. And what am I supposed to do when my permanent resident is unfortunately outside of Israel, and I have the great privilege to travel to Israel, and what am I supposed to do while I'm there? So these kinds of questions that you don't have to look far, you don't have to do deep research. They're to be found exactly in the back of the Koren Siddur. And they have some other very useful things. What parts of davening can you interrupt for? What other parts of davening?
Right, there's like a chart.
A chart, yeah, they have a chart. It's a great chart. It's a little bit confusing to use, but if you get the hang of it, then it's right.
It's much better to come on time to shul and not have
questions like that.
Even if you're a minute or two late, though, you could still be like, if you're still saying Psukei de Zimra while the Chazan reaches Chatzi Kaddish before Baruch, you respond to Baruch Hu in the middle of Psukei de Zimra, right? That could. You could come pretty much on time and just be a minute behind where everyone else is.
Yeah, you just say Psukei de Zimra slowly or whatever it is, yeah. Anyways, right, the halacha sections actually in the back of the Koren are very useful and interesting and also just worth, as they say, perusing at your leisure. Just because you can learn things about holidays and all sorts of stuff that's in the back there. That's actually very nice. So we're really thrilled about this decision. And
in the coming weeks and months, the purchase will be made, the books will be introduced, the sorting will take place, and all of those technological fixes will be introduced. So it'll be it's not going to be tomorrow that you'll see like all of a sudden a change in shul, but this will be communicated to the congregation, and some process will be thought through of implementing this decision.
Yeah, but we're very excited about it.
Okay, our guest today is Rabbi Aaron Katchen, who is our friendly local sales rep for Koren Publishers. So welcome to Shlensky Studios. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
So tell us a little bit about what does a Koren sales rep do, and how did you become a sales rep for Koren?
Okay, so I'll back up first. Where did I come from, and then how that helps with what I do. I was a Hillel rabbi for a number of years, and where one finds success in that work is really about not just having a specific vision for each individual student, saying, this is where I want you to be, but rather really spending the time to get to know the students and the student body, and then helping them with the questions that they bring to the table. And so the buzzword in the field is relationship.
Indeed.
And so I was ready to make a change in my life that I reached where I wanted to be on campus. And as a rabbi, there are certain limits as far as what one can do, but I was open. And I made a joke to another Koren employee about trying to increase the presence of Koren in Canada, which then snowballed into me starting to work for the company on a preliminary basis. And after 1 year, they were open to me becoming full-time, which then expanded my reach, which brought me to Chicago and your lovely city.
So what cities are in your district, your purview, yeah.
So it's a big T. It's Canada and the Midwest.
Gotcha.
But then like Seattle is also attached to that because it's so close to Vancouver, and I have to go to Vancouver. Then it just makes sense for that to be me rather than California.
Sure. And so in your job as sales rep, you meet with rabbis, you meet with schools, and
correct. And so it's really a lot of those same skills that I got to use or I developed while working on campus. It's not just coming into every shul and saying it's a one-size-fits-all. Here's what you need. This is the direction you need to go. It's really about building those relationships, the trust, with not just the rabbis, but also the ritual committees, as well as the executive directors, and all the different pieces that are involved in making decisions. And at the school level, it's not just the heads of school. It's also their teachers, and being able to engage in what questions and challenges they're facing, to then be able to say, this is the right product for you, or, you know what, we offer this, but I don't think it fits what you're trying to do right now. If we have a product that matches, being able to provide that. If we don't have a product that matches, being able to maintain the relationship for either we've developed the product down the road, or they have a move in their vision and their direction that then comes in line with what we have at play. So really, a lot of it is not just about buy my book. It's much more about who are you, where are you trying to go, and where can we find those meeting points in what we're trying to do as a company, and really impact Jewish tefilat and Jewish learning through the books that we are being able to produce.
Amazing. So let's talk a little bit about some of those educational resources, because the shul actually does stock, I think, most of the educational stages of the Siddurim, and we use them in our youth tefilah on Shabbat mornings. We have some stocked in the shul for kids who come during the week. I in the winter especially, I often bring my kids to shul for Mincha Maariv, after their school day is over, and we have a few copies of the various youth Siddurim, which they always grab those first.
Right.
They really enjoy them. So can you just share? I don't think all of our listeners necessarily know about that, and I think it's interesting.
So even before I started with the company, I was excited about the educational Siddurim, the Megerman's educational series of Siddurim that we've been putting out, because I've really been struggling with the question around tefilah from the time that I was studying in Israel all the way through my different roles as a parent, working at a summer camp. It's just been that nut that everyone's been trying to crack, and those have some greater success than others, but more or less it's been a real trouble for most institutions.
Yeah.
And so what I became excited about when I first saw it was the realization that the Siddur is only a tool. There's no such thing as a silver bullet when it comes to tefilah education, but having a better Siddur helps the process. Number two, and this really is the philosophy that Daniel Rose, who helped start the series, and it's continued through all 4 volumes, and I'll talk about those in a moment, is the idea that, and I'm quoting him, is that when a child starts grade 1, we don't give them a calculus textbook because they're going to study calculus in grade 12.
That is true.
And why do we do that with tefilah? Where a child is when we are starting them in their chinuch, in their educational exploration of tefilah, why do we think just giving them a Siddur with bigger font is somehow now more child-friendly, as opposed to being able to provide them with a tool that is accessible to their spiritual level? And I find that children are much more spiritual than adults. They're much more open to asking those real meaningful questions, as opposed to trying to reconstruct the world in their own reality. They're really trying to understand, how does the world work? And so by giving them the tools on the page, so that when they're engaged in the educational process and not just the davening, there are materials available to them to help explore and create that wonder around the different topics that come up page after page through a Siddur. Also, for the child who tends to zone out, instead of having them look off to the corner of the room, there's something for them to focus on that really is about developing them as a Jew and developing them as somebody who is engaged in the process of tefilah, right there on the page.
Like illustrations or guiding questions. Or
exactly. And so that carries its way through all 4 volumes. We have the Children's Siddur, which is really designed for the preschool environment up to maybe grade 1. Our Youth Siddur, which is for an elementary school environment. And you'll have to excuse me if I use Canadian terms that don't fully line up with all of your listeners. But up to about grade 5, pre-bar and bat mitzvah. We then have the Aviv and the NCSY. The Aviv is really our middle school Siddur. The NCSY also, it's the exact same Siddur. It just includes Shabbat. And so those we've designed for middle schools. And then the Tefilah, which Rabbi J. Goldman's developed, which is our high school and beyond Siddur. But we find that there are schools and shuls that mix and match between the different ages, all of those different pieces. But the idea really is, how do we get the right tool into both the right teacher's hands as well as the right learners and daveners' hands? And then the other piece associated with it, because there's all of these wonderful readings and reflections, and in the tefilat, there's a fantastic frequently asked questions that Jay Goldman addresses from his own struggles, which really gives permission to the student to struggle, is this idea that you can't just approach tefilah at the time of tefilah. Yeah. That one really needs to be engaged with it. I learned this from one of my teachers, Rabbi Ari Ben David, who now runs Ayeka. This idea of you don't start running a marathon by running a marathon. You train for it.
Yes.
And so why is it this intimate moment we're either having with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that we're having with God, or if you're more Hirschian, that you're having with yourself in front of God? Why is it that we don't engage in preparing ourselves for that in any meaningful ways? And so these Siddurim really do provide those texts and tools, both in a classroom environment as well as for the student by themselves, to really start developing those relationships, so that when they're in tefillah, they might be saying the words of the tefillah, but there's a lot more built into it of their own understanding.
Wonderful. So let me pivot to a broader question. There's some project that you're cooking up in your the back offices and Koren headquarters that you're really excited about, that either has just been released that we may not have seen or heard about yet, or that's coming down the pike that we can all be excited to see.
So I think there's two. One, I love the Talmud. It was one of the pieces that my own studies that I've always really enjoyed my Talmud learning. And now our Talmud is complete. Our full translation of the Koren Talmud Bavli with Rav Adin Steinsaltz is now complete and available. And so that, for me, has been such a bracha, such a blessing to be able to now have it fully available and accessible, that it really is a useful tool, whether somebody has been learning their whole lives or they're new to learning. It's not going to be too high above them or too low below them.
I want to say I agree. We use that in our Daf Yomi group here at the shul, and as the one who teaches Daf Yomi most mornings, it's a wonderful tool for me. It enables me to get just the support I need to be able to teach the class with some added notes, not too much, it's not overwhelming, and so I find it a tremendous tool. The shul doesn't yet have a complete set because we started Daf Yomi here at Anshe Shalom with Masechah Ketubot, so we're a few years in, but I guess we'll eventually, please God, complete our set in our shul's library.
The other series that I'm really excited about, we haven't fully released it to the public, but it's our Mikrot HaDorot, which is going to be released by Parsha, that you go the normal way that you would open a text. You have the full Parsha with Rashi and Rabbi Sachs's new translation. It's small enough that it's easy for you to bring each week to shul for the Kriya. But when you open it the more English way, it's divided into 3 sections of 3 eras of collated commentary. And so the first one is the sages. It's all of the rabbis, Chazal, all the way through the late Midrashim. The next level, you have the Rishonim through early Achronim, so the medieval era to the early modern era of commentators. And then the third era is more the modern era, the late Achronim, the later modern commentators, all the way through Nechama Leibovich, divided by Parsha. And so one could either do it that they try and do a survey of all of them, or that they could say, I'm going to focus on the sages this year, the Chazal piece, or I'm going to focus on this, that there's a way to be able to be usable and accessible, whether it's a rabbi trying to write a drasha, whether it's a person trying to be able to share some Torah at the table, or if it's just somebody trying to advance their own learning, to be able to be accessible beyond what they would normally see.
That's amazing. Well, no one would ever have to talk again in shul if they could bring one of these with them, to sit there. That's really great. And so that's, I think I've seen one volume. It's for Parshat Shemot. Is that
correct?
Okay. And what's the pace of?
It's a good question. I don't want to be held
to
it.
Okay.
I've seen some, but it's coming out. It's going to be quickly coming out.
Oh, wonderful. That's really great. That's really, really exciting. Terrific. So one last question. I understand you also, in addition to all that you do for Koren, you also have a small shul where you serve in Canada. Can you tell us a little bit about that shul? Where could our listeners find you? Maybe some of our listeners already know you from your shul.
Great. Thank you. So I'm very fortunate to be the rabbi of Beit Zion. It used to be called the Mizrahi Bayit for those who are from Toronto or have heard of it. We're in the Bathurst Wilson Clanton Park neighborhood, right on Wilson. It's just a wonderful small shul of about 25 to 35 member families who just like being together. That many of them come from diverse backgrounds, but at the end of the day, they'd rather be together than not. And so it's just been such a wonderful place to serve.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much for coming in today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Straw Hat. Thank you, as always, to our producer, Haley Leventhal, for all of her hard work in making this happen. Not just editing the podcast, but even making sure that it gets recorded in a timely manner in the first place. As always, if you enjoyed this episode, feel free to send us fan mail or tell us in person or rate us 5 stars on whatever app you use to listen to podcasts. And if you didn't like this episode, I think a really productive thing you could do with that negative energy would be to dedicate a Siddur to the shul in honor of how much you dislike the podcast. I think that would be like a very productive use of those energies. Have a wonderful week. Thank you so much for listening.